The fluorescent lights of the Westfield Mall food court cast a sterile, almost clinical glow over the bustling Saturday crowd. For 16-year-old Zora Jackson, the light was less an aesthetic detail and more a matter of physics. It was a form of energy, a specific wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum, and right now it was irrelevant. Her mind was a fortress of equations and project requirements, mentally cataloging the components needed for her solar energy converter. She wasn't here for leisure, she was on a mission. Her NASA t-shirt, a quiet nod to her aspirations, hugged her slender frame, and she absent-mindedly adjusted her natural hair puff as she walked. As a top student with a methodical mind, she approached shopping with the same precision she applied to her AP chemistry homework. Her destination was Electromax, a high-end electronics store nestled between a luxury handbag boutique and a designer suit shop. This was a place where technology was sold as a status symbol, not a tool for scientific inquiry. Zora felt out of place among the pristine displays and sleek minimalist decor, but the store carried the specific microcontrollers and photovoltaic cells her project required. As she moved through the aisles, her eyes scanned her meticulously prepared shopping list on her phone, comparing prices and specifications with a focused intensity. What Zora didn't notice was the suspicious gaze of the store clerk. He was a middle-aged man with thinning hair and a perpetual frown, his name tag Garrett a stark contrast to his unwelcoming demeanor. He watched her every move, his eyes narrowing as she browsed the phone accessories. He'd seen her kind before. He thought always lurking, always looking for an opportunity. He followed her discreetly, straightening items she hadn't even touched, his movements, an unspoken accusation. "You planning on buying something, or are you just browsing?" He asked, his voice a low, grating rumble that seemed to materialize out of thin air. Zora looked up, startled, and offered a polite smile. "I am, sir. I'm a student at Westwood High, working on a school project. I have a list of what I need." She held up her detailed shopping list, hoping the sight of the official school letterhead would put his mind at ease. Garrett's frown only deepened. "Right. A project." His tone dripped with skepticism. He continued to hover his presence, a dark cloud over her carefully planned mission. Zora, unaccustomed to such open hostility, felt a prickle of unease. She tried to ignore him, returning her attention to the shelves, her heart rate quickening with a faint sense of panic she had not anticipated. She had almost found the last component on her list when a piercing shriek cut through the ambient mall music. "My phone is gone." The shriek came from the smartphone display section. Zora turned to see a woman in a designer pantsuit, her expensive highlights catching the light. She was frantically digging through her enormous handbag, her manicured fingers flying with a theatrical intensity. This was Karen Thompson, a regular customer known for her lavish spending and equally lavish sense of entitlement. "My brand new iPhone. It cost $2,000. Karen shrieked again, her voice a sharp, accusatory blade. Her eyes, frantic and searching, landed on Zora. The girl was close to the display, looking down at a small electronic part. A perfect target. Karen's manicured finger jabbed the air, pointing directly at Zora. It was her. "She's been lurking around here for 20 minutes. The accusation hung in the air, a silence so profound it felt like a vacuum had just formed around Zora. Garrett, the store manager, materialized at Karen's side with alarming speed, a veneer of concern on his face. He nodded sympathetically to Karen, not even sparing a glance for Zora. "We'll handle this, ma'am," he said with a practiced calm, a predator-like efficiency in his tone. Before Zora could utter a single word of protest, two burly security guards appeared as if from the shadows. They were twin towers of muscle and ill-fitting uniforms. One, a man with a military-style haircut and a gruff expression, grabbed Zora's right arm. His partner seized her left. Their grip was immediate, painful, and non-negotiable. "There's been a mistake," Zora said, her voice calm despite the rising panic in her chest. She had been trained by her mother to remain composed in moments of crisis. "I didn't take anything. I'm here for my school project. You can check my bags." Her pleas were met with cold indifference. The guards spoke over her as if she were an inanimate object. "Got another one trying to boost electronics." The guard on her right said into his radio, his voice laced with a cynical satisfaction, bringing her to the security office. Zora felt a wave of humiliation burn hotter than the painful grip of the guard's hands. They marched her through the crowded mall, past families eating ice cream and teenagers taking selfies. The dozens of eyes on her felt like a physical weight. Her dignity, her careful composure was stripped away in a few agonizing minutes. The security office was a small, cramped room, a stark contrast to the sprawling mall. It smelled of stale coffee and desperation. She was led to a hard metal chair and told to sit, the two guards standing over her like sentinels. Her hands were still held tightly behind her back, the pain in her wrists intensifying with every second. Within minutes, Officer James Reeves of the Atlanta Police Department strode into the room. His hand rested casually on his holstered weapon, his presence exuding an intimidating casual authority. He had cold blue eyes that seemed to size her up with a singular dismissive glance. "So what do we have here?" he asked, not to Zora, but to Garrett, the store manager. Garrett puffed up his chest, a self-important smirk on his face. "Caught this one stealing a customer's phone. High-end model. $2,000. Zora tried again, her voice steady, despite her heart racing a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "Sir, I did not steal anything. I'm an AP student at Westwood High. I was buying parts for my science project. You can call my teacher, Mr. Harrington, to verify my assignment." Officer Reeves barely glanced at her. "Yeah, sure. Heard that one before." His tone was patronizing, full of prejudgments. "Empty your pockets and bag." When Zora did as she was instructed, her movements precise and deliberate, Reeves roughly dumped the contents onto the table. Her carefully organized components, her school notebooks and personal items, were scattered across the grubby surface. Her wallet fell open, revealing her perfect attendance certificate and student ID. Reeves ignored them completely, his eyes narrowing as he rifled through her belongings with an almost brutal lack of care. When no phone was found, a flicker of irritation crossed his face, quickly replaced by a smug certainty. "Where'd you hide it?" he demanded. "I didn't take any phone," Zora repeated, a profound sense of exhaustion settling in. She recalled her grandmother's lesson: maintain composure. "It is a power they cannot take from you. There's no evidence because I didn't do anything wrong. There should be security footage you can check." Karen Thompson, who had been sitting comfortably in a corner chair, snorted derisively. "She probably has an accomplice. These people always work in groups." The casual racism hung in the air, thick and unchallenged. Officer Reeves nodded in agreement, a silent endorsement of the bigotry. Without warning, he pulled out his handcuffs. "Until we sort this out, you're being detained on suspicion of theft." The cold metal bit into Zora's wrists as he applied the cuffs. They were far tighter than necessary, the steel cutting into her skin. She winced as tiny beads of blood welled up. "These are too tight," she said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. "They're cutting me." Reeves ignored her completely. The small crowd of mall employees and security personnel watched impassively as a straight-A student with no record was handcuffed like a dangerous criminal. The humiliation was total, but Zora took a deep breath, centering herself. "I'd like to call my mother now. It's my right to make a phone call." Officer Reeves raised an eyebrow, a mocking smirk playing on his lips. "And who's your mother? Someone important?" Zora met his gaze steadily, her head held high. "My mother is Colonel Vanessa Manning. She serves with the Special Forces at the Pentagon." The room erupted in mocking laughter led by Officer Reeves himself. "Right," he sneered. "And my dad's the president." "Listen, girl, making up stories about your family won't help your situation." His emphasis on your family carried an unmistakable racial undertone, a jab at her background and her identity. "Nice try, though. Very creative." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low conspiratorial whisper. "People like you always think you can talk your way out of trouble, but I've been doing this job 20 years. I know your kind." The blatant prejudice stunned even Zora, who had experienced her share of discrimination. She said nothing, letting the weight of his words hang in the air, incriminating him far more effectively than any response she could offer. After a moment of tense silence, Reeves shrugged. "Fine, make your call. Let's see this Colonel Mother of yours." He unlocked her phone and held it up mockingly, clearly expecting the call to expose another lie. With dignity, despite her bleeding wrists, Zora recited her mother's number. As the phone began to ring, a flicker of grim determination crossed her face. She knew exactly what was coming. Meanwhile, a world away from the chaos of the Westfield Mall security office, Colonel Vanessa Manning sat perfectly straight in her chair at the Pentagon's secure briefing room. Her attention was focused on projection screens displaying satellite imagery of potential threats in Eastern Europe. Her posture was one of absolute unshakable control. 20 years of military service had trained her to compartmentalize, to separate the chaos of global conflict from the ordered precision of her decision-making. As the first black woman ever accepted into Delta Force, Vanessa had spent her career defying expectations and breaking barriers. Her chest bore the weight of numerous medals, including a Silver Star for valor under fire, in operations she could never discuss publicly. The secure phone in her pocket vibrated silently, a sensation she typically ignored during high-level briefings. Something made her check at this time, perhaps a maternal instinct that transcended even military protocol. Seeing Zora's number, a flicker of concern immediately registered behind her professionally neutral expression. Her daughter never called during school hours unless something was terribly wrong. "Excuse me, generals, I need to take this call." "Family emergency," she stated with the quiet, unquestionable authority that had helped her navigate both combat zones and Pentagon politics. The four-star generals at the table nodded respectfully as she stepped outside the briefing room. "Zora, what's wrong?" She answered, her voice instantly shifting from commander to mother. The background noise told her Zora wasn't at school, but somewhere with a distinct echo and a low hum of chatter. Mom Zora's voice was controlled but tense in a way only a mother would recognize. "I'm being detained at Westfield Mall security office. Someone accused me of stealing their phone. I'm handcuffed and they won't check the security footage. They're laughing at me for telling them who you are." Vanessa's mind processed this information with battlefield efficiency, noting the restraint in her daughter's voice that masked fear and pain. "Are you hurt?" she asked sharply, the military commander's urgency returning to her tone. "The handcuffs are too tight. They're cutting my wrists and everyone here is—" Zora paused, choosing her words carefully, knowing she was on speaker, making assumptions based on how I look. In that moment, Vanessa felt the familiar double burden she'd carried throughout her career, serving a country that didn't always serve people who looked like her and her daughter. A cold, quiet fury, far more dangerous than any overt rage, settled over her. This wasn't a mission on foreign soil. This was a direct personal assault on her most precious asset. The tactical gears began to turn. "I'm coming," she said, her voice a low, steely promise. "Stay calm. Give them nothing. I'll be there in 30 minutes. She ended the call, her mind already calculating routes and mobilizing her network with the same precision she used to plan a combat operation. Her controlled fury was a force of nature, a weapon she was about to unleash on a group of people who had no idea who they were truly messing with. Colonel Vanessa Manning strode with purpose from the secure briefing room, the rhythmic click of her heels on the polished marble floor, a sharp counterpoint to the quiet hum of the Pentagon. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of strategic analysis, had already moved past the satellite imagery of Eastern Europe and onto a more immediate personal threat. The anger that had settled over her was not a fiery, consuming rage, but a cold, hard, tactical fury. This was not a moment for emotion. It was a moment for action. She walked with the effortless confidence of a woman who had navigated some of the world's most dangerous spaces. Her career had been a masterclass in breaking barriers. She was the first woman and the first black woman to be accepted into Delta Force, a feat that had required not just physical excellence, but a mental fortitude that few could comprehend. She had trained in the mountains of Colorado and the deserts of the Middle East, a ghost in the shadows, a force multiplier in the field. Her chest beneath her perfectly pressed uniform jacket bore the weight of numerous medals, each a silent testament to her valor, her sacrifice, and her unyielding commitment. The Silver Star, in particular, was for an operation so classified its details would forever remain in the dark corners of her memory. As she moved toward her office, her thoughts flashed back to the many conversations she'd had with her daughter. They weren't like the typical mother-daughter chats about school or friends. They were lessons in survival, taught not with fear, but with wisdom. She remembered teaching Zora at the age of 7 how to respond if stopped by police. Keep your hands visible. Speak respectfully, but know your rights. Don't make sudden movements. Lessons no child should need, yet essential for survival. She recalled Zora's innocent question. But if I didn't do anything wrong, why would they stop me? The impossibility of answering that question honestly without dimming her daughter's bright spirit had nearly broken Vanessa's heart. She had found a way to prepare Zora for the world's injustices while preserving her sense of self-worth. Because sometimes people make mistakes based on fear, she had explained. Your job is to stay safe until those mistakes can be corrected. Now those lessons felt tragically relevant. Zora was applying that composure in a hostile, unjust situation, and Vanessa felt a fierce protective instinct rise up. She reached her office, a space of controlled efficiency, and began making calls. The first was to her commanding officer, General Marcus Hayes. He was a man who had served alongside her in 3 combat zones and knew her capabilities better than almost anyone. The secure line connected immediately. "Sir, my daughter is being illegally detained at Westfield Mall." Vanessa stated, her voice calm and clipped. "I need emergency leave and possibly support." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Go. Take whatever resources you need. Keep me updated." His trust in her was absolute. Next was a call to Major Terrence Williams, a JAG course attorney and a longtime friend. He had a reputation for being an intellectual powerhouse with a mind as sharp as a scalpel. "Terrence, Zora is being held at Westfield Mall. Racial profiling situation. Meet me there ASAP with whatever legal documents you need to shut it down." The request was not a question, it was a directive. Her final call was to Captain Elena Rodriguez, a rising star in the military police. Elena was known for her unyielding professionalism and her meticulous attention to detail. "Elena, I need you at Westfield Mall security office. Bring a medical kit. They have my daughter in excessively tight handcuffs." With the calls made, Vanessa moved to her locker. She quickly changed from her formal uniform into civilian clothes. She chose deliberately dark jeans, a burgundy blouse, and a tailored black blazer. It was an outfit that wouldn't immediately reveal her military status, but her posture, her bearing, her very presence had been shaped by decades of command. No civilian clothes could ever disguise that. She tucked her military ID into her pocket out of immediate sight. She wanted to see how they would behave when they thought she was just another black mother. As she navigated Atlanta's midday traffic, her mind flashed through previous incidents. The time Zora's science project was questioned because the teacher couldn't believe she'd done the work herself. The security guard who had followed them through an upscale department store. The college recruiter who had suggested Zora consider less competitive schools despite her perfect GPA. Each memory fueled her controlled fury. She mentally calculated routes and alternatives like a tactical mission, every potential traffic jam a hostile obstacle. The 28-minute drive gave her time to recall Zora's innocent question, "Why would they stop me if I didn't do anything wrong?" The pain of that memory was a familiar ache, but it sharpened her resolve. She had prepared Zora for a world that would sometimes judge her unfairly, but she had always told her that she would never have to face it alone. 20 minutes after receiving Zora's call, Vanessa pulled into the Westfield Mall parking lot, positioning her car for a quick departure. She texted her team their precise rendezvous points, then called her attorney again. "I'm going in first. Give me 5 minutes, then follow. I want to see how they behave when they think I'm just another black mother." She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, her eyes a steely and resolute reflection of the woman who had led troops into battle. She took a deep breath, centering herself the way she had before countless dangerous missions. This time, however, the stakes felt even higher. This wasn't about national security or foreign threats. This was about her daughter, the brilliant, kind young woman who represented everything Vanessa had fought to protect. As she walked toward the mall entrance, her phone vibrated with confirmations from her military colleagues, all converging on the location from different directions. Colonel Vanessa Manning had faced enemy fire without flinching. But nothing had prepared her for the cold fury she felt, knowing her child was suffering because of the same prejudices she had fought against her entire career. The automatic glass door slid open, and she stepped into the mall with the focused intensity of a soldier entering enemy territory. This would not stand. Colonel Vanessa Manning entered Westfield Mall with the calculated precision that had become second nature through years of military operations. Though dressed in civilian clothes, dark jeans, a burgundy blouse, and a tailored black blazer, she moved with unmistakable authority. Her eyes scanned the environment with tactical awareness, noting exits, cameras, and the flow of unsuspecting shoppers. Mall security guards stationed near the entrance straightened involuntarily as she passed, responding instinctively to her commanding presence without understanding why. Following signs to the security office, Vanessa maintained an unhurried pace, her breathing controlled despite the rage simmering beneath her composed exterior. This was not a sprint. It was a methodical advance. The security office door was closed but unlocked. Without knocking, she opened it and stepped inside, instantly absorbing every detail of the scene. The air was thick with the scent of stale coffee, cheap air freshener, and the subtle metallic tang of fear. Zora sat handcuffed to a chair, her shoulders held straight despite the visible blood trickling from her wrists. Officer Reeves stood over her with a posture of contempt, his hand still resting casually on his holstered weapon. The store manager, Garrett Wilson, hovered nearby, looking self-important. In the corner, Karen Thompson sat comfortably scrolling through her phone, a smug look on her face. 2 security guards flanked the door, their expressions changing from boredom to surprise as Vanessa entered. In the momentary silence that followed her entrance, Vanessa locked eyes with her daughter. It was a silent conversation, a lifetime of understanding distilled into a single glance. Zora's slight nod confirmed she was holding up, despite the humiliation and physical discomfort. "I'm Vanessa Manning, Zora's mother," she stated, her voice carrying the same calm, resonant tone she used to brief Pentagon officials. It was a voice that commanded attention, not demanded it. "I want those handcuffs removed from my daughter immediately." Officer Reeves barely glanced up, his dismissive attitude palpable. "Ma'am, your daughter is being detained for a theft investigation. We'll handle the cuffs when we're finished questioning her." His condescending tone made it clear he expected compliance from yet another intimidated black parent. Vanessa's expression didn't change. She took a step forward, her gaze locking onto him. "Officer Reeves," she replied deliberately, using his name, though he wore no visible identification. Her intelligence gathering was already complete. "My daughter has visible injuries from improperly applied restraints. You have no evidence of any crime, have denied her due process, and are currently violating department regulations regarding the detainment of minors." The precision of her knowledge caused Reeves to look up, reassessing her with narrowed eyes. "And how exactly would you know department regulations?" His tone remained dismissive, but a flicker of uncertainty had entered his expression. Without answering, Vanessa reached into her pocket and placed her military ID on the table. It landed with a soft, authoritative thud, positioned so everyone in the room could see the rank and special classifications. "Colonel Vanessa Manning, United States Army Special Forces, currently stationed at the Pentagon with Level 8 security clearance." Now she said, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous command. "Remove those handcuffs from my daughter before this escalates beyond your control." The room temperature seemed to drop several degrees as Reeves stared at the ID. The smug expression on his face dissolved into one of dumbstruck disbelief. The store manager, Garrett Wilson, shifted uncomfortably, his previous self-importance deflating like a punctured balloon. Karen Thompson, who had been scrolling on her phone, suddenly found great interest in examining her manicure. The security guards exchanged glances, sensing the dramatic shift in power dynamics. Reeves, however, was a man whose arrogance was deeply ingrained. He doubled down, his voice losing some of its confidence but none of its belligerence. "Playing the race card with a military ID doesn't change procedure," he said. "We have a credible accusation from a reliable witness." He gestured toward Karen Thompson. "We're handling this by the book." Vanessa's expression remained a mask of controlled fury, but her voice took on a steely quality, familiar only to those who had served under her command. "What book would that be, officer?" "The one that says you detain and handcuff minors without evidence. The one that says you ignore requests to review security footage. Or perhaps the one that encourages you to apply restraints tightly enough to cause bleeding." She turned slightly toward the store manager. "Mr. Wilson, I presume your store has a written policy regarding theft accusations, one that requires verification through security footage before any detention occurs. Has that footage been reviewed?" Wilson's face flushed a deep red. "We don't need to check footage when we have an eyewitness," he stammered, gesturing toward Karen. Vanessa's gaze shifted to Karen Thompson, who was now intently studying her shopping bags. "And you are so certain my daughter took your phone that you're willing to testify to that in court, under oath, with potential penalties for false accusations?" Before Karen could respond, the door opened again as Major Terrence Williams entered. He was wearing his impeccable JAG Corps uniform and carrying a leather briefcase. His presence was calm, professional, and undeniably powerful. "Colonel Manning," he nodded, his voice steady. "I've taken the liberty of contacting Police Chief Garcia regarding this situation. He sends his regards to Officer Reeves and requests an immediate update." The mention of his superior caused Reeves to pale slightly. He instinctively looked at the security office phone, then at his own radio, as if unsure of which line to use to report this sudden catastrophic turn of events. Captain Elena Rodriguez entered next, her military police uniform impeccable. She carried a medical kit in her hand. "Colonel," she said, her tone all business, "the medical team is standing by and I've secured the perimeter as requested." This military terminology implying a much larger operation was deliberately chosen to unsettle everyone in the room. Vanessa nodded to her colleagues before turning back to Officer Reeves. "Now shall we start again? Remove those handcuffs. Provide medical attention to my daughter. And let's review the security footage that should have been checked before any of this occurred." When Reeves hesitated, Major Williams stepped forward. "Perhaps I wasn't clear, officer. Police Chief Garcia is personally expecting your call. Shall I dial him for you?" The mention of the police chief a second time finally broke through Reeves's arrogance. He reluctantly moved to unlock Zora's handcuffs, revealing angry red gashes where the metal had cut into her skin. Captain Rodriguez immediately moved to Zora's side with her first aid kit, professionally treating and documenting the injuries with her phone camera. As this was happening, a familiar ringtone emitted from Karen Thompson's designer purse. Everyone in the room froze as she hurriedly dug through her bag, extracting an iPhone identical to the one she had accused Zora of stealing. Color drained from her face as she quickly silenced the phone, but it was too late. The moment was frozen in time, the definitive proof of the lie she had told. "Would that be your supposedly stolen phone, Miss Thompson?" Vanessa asked quietly. "Or perhaps you have two identical models." The store manager began edging toward the door as Karen stammered, her composure completely gone. I must have overlooked it. Simple mistake. No harm done." "No harm," Vanessa's voice remained calm, but it carried throughout the now silent room, holding everyone in place. She gestured to Zora's bleeding wrists. "My daughter is bleeding. She was publicly humiliated, handcuffed, and accused of a crime without evidence. And you call that no harm?" She paused, the weight of her words settling over them all. "The harm, Miss Thompson, is just beginning." The security office fell into an uncomfortable silence. The air, already thick with tension, now hummed with the electric charge of a lie exposed. Captain Rodriguez, with the quiet efficiency of her profession, continued to treat Zora's injured wrists, her movements precise and her face unreadable. Colonel Manning stood unwavering, her attention now focused on the mall's security monitor, which showed live footage from the electronics store. A new figure appeared in the doorway, the mall's head of security, a nervous man named Dennis Parker, his face slick with sweat. He had apparently received a frantic phone call from Police Chief Garcia and was now scrambling to make amends. He offered full cooperation, his voice a tremor of panic. "There." Vanessa pointed at the screen, her finger tracing a specific moment. The footage, as if in a movie rewound, showing Karen Thompson clearly placing her phone into the shopping bag she'd been carrying all along. The timestamp indicated this happened 5 minutes before her theatrical accusation. "Play it again." Major Williams requested, his voice a low, authoritative rumble. He held up his own phone, recording the footage as evidence. Parker complied, and the room watched in stunned silence as Karen Thompson deliberately set her phone in her shopping bag, glanced around furtively, then proceeded to make a scene about it being missing. The footage continued, showing her specifically singling out Zora, despite several other shoppers being closer to her location. It was a cold, calculated move, not a mistake. "Now access Miss Thompson's customer profile in your system," Vanessa instructed Parker. Parker quickly typed commands into the computer, his eyebrows rising as the screen populated with information. "She has filed 7 similar complaints in the past 14 months, he revealed, scrolling through the data. All against... His voice trailed off, a note of deep discomfort in his tone as he noticed the clear pattern. Major Williams completed the sentence for him, taking screenshots. "All against shoppers of color." "And what actions were taken in those previous incidents?" Vanessa asked, her voice laced with a dangerous calm. Parker swallowed hard. "Security detention in all cases. Police called in 4 instances. No charges filed after the items were discovered elsewhere each time." He looked like a man who had just realized the full extent of his complicity. While this conversation continued, Captain Rodriguez had been quietly making calls of her own. She approached Vanessa with her tablet, her face grim. "Colonel Officer Reeves has 12 complaints of excessive force in his file, 9 involving minority suspects. All were dismissed without investigation." Officer Reeves, who had been silently fuming in the corner, surged forward, his face red with indignation. "That's confidential personnel information. You have no right to access that." Rodriguez remained perfectly calm, a steely gaze in her eyes. Actually, sir, when a pattern of civil rights violations appears possible, military intelligence has specific authorities granted under the Homeland Security Cooperation Act of 2023. This was a complete fabrication, but delivered with such professional confidence that Reeves hesitated, uncertain. The bluff was a masterstroke, a testament to the tactical genius of Vanessa's team. Outside the security office, the commotion had attracted attention. Mall shoppers had gathered, many recording with their phones. Someone had recognized Zora from her school's recent academic championship, and word had spread quickly about a star student being wrongfully detained. Local news vans could be seen pulling into the parking lot through the security office window. The private contained crisis was now a public spectacle. Karen Thompson finally broke her silence. "This is ridiculous. It was an honest mistake anyone could make. I'm late for an appointment." She stood to leave, but found Captain Rodriguez politely but firmly blocking her path. "I'm afraid we'll need a formal statement from you, Miss Thompson," Rodriguez said. "Making false accusations is a serious matter." The door opened again, admitting a distinguished older man in a police uniform, adorned with the insignia of the Atlanta police chief. Robert Garcia surveyed the room with experienced eyes, his gaze hardening when it fell on Officer Reeves. "I received concerning reports about an incident involving a minor. I see they weren't exaggerated." His attention shifted to Zora, his expression softening. "Are you all right, young lady?" Before Zora could answer, Karen Thompson attempted to use the distraction to slip out the door. She was stopped by the arrival of another officer who had accompanied the chief. "Karen Thompson," the officer asked, "we have some questions about a pattern of similar incidents at North Lake Mall and Perimeter Center." Karen's designer handbag slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a thud. "This is harassment. I was the victim here," she shrieked, her voice high and desperate. As attention focused on Karen's store manager, Garrett Wilson attempted his own quiet exit, only to be intercepted by Major Williams. Mr. Williams said smoothly, "We'll need access to all incident reports involving accusations of theft in your store for the past 2 years. Wilson's face grew pale. "Those are proprietary corporate documents. Not when they pertain to a potential civil rights investigation." Williams countered, a thin smile on his face. While this exchange occurred, Zora remained dignified despite her ordeal. The medical technician who had arrived with Police Chief Garcia confirmed that while her wrists would bruise significantly, no permanent damage had been done. Throughout all this, Officer Reeves had been growing increasingly agitated, his hand unconsciously moving toward his holstered weapon several times before stopping himself. "This is completely out of proportion," he finally burst out. "We received a complaint and responded according to procedure." Police Chief Garcia turned to him with a hard stare. "Which procedure authorized you to handcuff a minor so tightly it caused bleeding? Which procedure told you to ignore requests to review evidence that would have immediately exonerated her?" Before Reeves could respond, the chief continued, "And while we're discussing procedures, where is your body camera footage from this incident?" Reeves instinctively touched his chest where the camera should have been. "Technical malfunction. I reported it last week." "Interesting," Captain Rodriguez interjected, checking her tablet. "According to department records, your camera was certified functional during equipment check this morning." The mall security guards who had initially detained Zora had been silent witnesses to the unfolding scene. Now the younger of the two, Brad Reynolds, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir," he addressed the police chief, "I feel I should say something. We've been instructed by management to pay special attention to certain types of shoppers." He couldn't quite meet Zora's eyes as he spoke. Wilson immediately erupted. "That's a lie. We never gave any such instructions." Brad pulled out his phone. "I recorded our last staff meeting because I was uncomfortable with the directives." He offered the phone to Chief Garcia, who listened with a deepening frown before passing it to Major Williams. Another arrival interrupted the tension as a woman in an expensive suit entered, introducing herself as Jennifer Haynes, General Counsel for Westfield Mall's parent company. After a quick assessment of the situation, she turned to Colonel Manning. "On behalf of Westfield Properties, I want to express our deepest apologies for this incident. We would like to offer an immediate settlement to avoid unnecessary litigation." Vanessa regarded her coolly. "Ms. Haynes, this isn't about money. This is about a systemic issue that settlement checks conveniently bury. How many other families without Pentagon connections have endured similar treatment?" The lawyer's professional smile faltered. Meanwhile, Zora had noticed something on the security monitor that was still displaying footage from inside the store. "Mom," she said quietly, pointing to the screen. Everyone turned to see the current live footage showing store manager Wilson hurriedly accessing the security system at the store's main computer. Major Williams immediately got on his phone. Security breach in progress at Electromac's main office. Evidence being tampered with. Within moments, mall security rushed into the store on screen, preventing Wilson from completing whatever deletion he had attempted. As if the situation couldn't grow more chaotic, Karen Thompson's husband arrived, an imposing man in a $1,000 suit, who immediately began making threats. "My name is Richard Thompson of Thompson, Blackwell and Price. This detention is unlawful, and will be filing countercharges for defamation and harassment." Police Chief Garcia regarded him calmly. "Mr. Thompson, your wife was recorded planting evidence to falsely accuse a minor. I suggest you consider your next words very carefully." Outside, the crowd had grown substantially as words spread through social media. The local news crew had set up cameras interviewing witnesses who had seen Zora being marched through the mall in handcuffs. The story was already trending locally under the hashtag Justice for Zora. Inside the increasingly crowded security office, Zora remained the calm center of the storm. Despite her ordeal, she sat with perfect posture, her NASA t-shirt a poignant reminder of her academic aspirations that had been temporarily derailed by blatant prejudice. The security footage continued playing on multiple screens, revealing additional angles that showed Karen deliberately looking for a young person of color to accuse, passing over several white teenagers who had been closer to her. The evidence was becoming more damning by the minute. Yet Officer Reeves remained defiant. Karen Thompson insisted it was all a misunderstanding, and store manager Wilson was still attempting to defend his actions. As medical staff finished bandaging Zora's wrists, Colonel Manning knelt beside her daughter. "Are you ready to go home, or do you want to see this through?" she asked quietly. Zora looked around the room at the unfolding consequences of racial profiling that usually remained hidden and unpunished. "I want to stay," she replied with determination in her voice. "Someone needs to make sure this doesn't just disappear." Vanessa nodded with pride, standing to face the police chief. "We'll be filing formal charges," she stated firmly. "Not just against Miss Thompson, but against Officer Reeves for excessive force and against Electromax and Westfield Mall for discriminatory practices." As if on cue, 3 more people entered the already crowded office. Local civil rights attorney Benjamin Harris, accompanied by 2 young women, who gasped upon seeing Karen Thompson. "That's her," one of them said. "That's the woman who accused me of stealing her wallet at Perimeter Mall last month." The threads of a much larger pattern of discrimination were starting to weave together, revealing a tapestry of injustice that had gone unchallenged for far too long. The security office, once a small and sterile space, had become a pressure cooker of escalating tension and unfolding consequence. As Zora and Vanessa prepared to leave, the door opened yet again. This time, it was a group of reporters, their cameras flashing microphones held aloft like weapons. The story had officially gone public. Despite the chaos, Zora remained the still center of the storm, her dignity intact, her purpose clear. Vanessa, standing by her side, was a fortress of calm, a silent promise of protection. As Zora was wheeled out on a gurney, her bandaged wrists a stark visual reminder of the day's events, she was met with a throng of people. Some were onlookers recording on their phones, but others were supporters holding hastily made signs, "Justice for Zora," and "Black excellence is not a crime." The local news crew, having set up cameras outside the security office, began interviewing witnesses who had seen Zora being marched through the mall in handcuffs. The story was already trending nationally. The next morning, the calm of the Manning family home was shattered by the relentless ringing of phones. Media requests poured in, but so did something else, a coordinated campaign of pushback. The police union, sensing a threat to one of their own, issued a statement supporting Officer Reeves. They characterized the incident as a routine detention that had been politicized by outside agitators. The mall's corporate attorneys contacted Major Williams with a second, even larger settlement offer contingent on a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that would prevent Zora and Vanessa from ever discussing the incident publicly. On social media, the narrative began to shift. The hashtag Justice for Zora was now competing with Back the Blue, and Officer Reeves did nothing wrong. Anonymous accounts began posting negative comments about Zora, questioning her character and suggesting she had behaved suspiciously in the store. The articles that followed this narrative were thinly veiled attacks. They quoted anonymous sources who claimed Zora had an attitude and had tried to talk her way out of trouble. At school, Zora faced a microcosm of the divided community. Her close friends, a diverse group of academic heavyweights, rallied protectively around her. They created a study group to ensure her grades wouldn't suffer and volunteered to handle her AP chemistry project. But she also noticed the whispers in the hallways and the stares from students she didn't know. Some teachers offered quiet words of support, while others, perhaps fearing controversy, maintained a noticeable distance. During lunch one day, she overheard a girl at the next table. "My dad says her mom is just using this for attention. Military people always think they're special." The comment stung a reminder that prejudice wasn't just about race, but about class and perception. Zora kept her composure, but the words felt like a physical blow. Vanessa, meanwhile, faced her own professional battles. A scheduled promotion review had been mysteriously postponed. Her commanding officer, General Hayes, was supportive in private, but his official communications grew cautious. "The political landscape is complicated," he explained during a secure call. "Some influential figures view this as anti-police rather than anti-discrimination." The message was clear. Powerful forces preferred this incident to disappear quietly to not rock the boat. The pressure intensified daily. An unmarked envelope arrived at their home containing printed screenshots of social media posts with racist comments and veiled threats. Colonel Manning immediately contacted security personnel from her unit, who arrived within hours to assess their home's vulnerability and establish protective measures. "This is standard intimidation strategy," Captain Rodriguez explained as she installed additional security cameras. "They're hoping you'll decide it's not worth the trouble and drop everything." The most personal blow came when Zora's application for the prestigious Brenner Science Scholarship was officially deferred pending a character review. The scholarship, her path to her dream universities, was being held hostage. The timing left no doubt about the connection to her ongoing case. Despite these mounting pressures, unexpected support emerged from various quarters. 3 of Vanessa's former Delta Force colleagues, now working in private security, volunteered to protect their home. Teachers from other schools sent messages of solidarity. And most powerfully, a group of veterans from various military branches formed an impromptu protective perimeter around their home, cleaning the remaining vandalism and standing guard. "Colonel," a retired Marine sergeant, told Vanessa, his voice a low rumble. "Word got around about what happened to your home. We thought you could use some support. We don't stand for our families being treated this way." This act of solidarity was a profound statement. It showed that the military community was not a monolith and that the bonds of service transcended race and politics. Zora and Vanessa were not alone. An entire network of silent allies was rising to meet the challenge. Later that evening, as they cleaned the last of the hateful graffiti from their front door, Zora finally allowed herself a moment of vulnerability. Her hands trembled slightly as she scrubbed at the painted slurs. "Mom, is this worth it? Maybe we should just take the settlement." Vanessa set down her cleaning supplies and faced her daughter directly, her eyes filled with a familiar mix of pride and fierce protectiveness. That's exactly what they want. For good people to decide justice is too expensive, too troublesome to pursue. She gestured toward the partially clean door. "This happens because they're afraid. Not of us specifically, but of what happens when people like us refuse to be silenced." After a moment of reflection, Zora nodded slowly. "Like that quote on your office wall. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." Vanessa smiled, a rare, genuine expression of pride. "Exactly. But I need you to understand something important. This has to be your choice. If you want to accept the settlement and move on, I'll support that decision completely. Your well-being comes first." Zora looked down at her still healing wrists, then back at the hateful words still visible on their door. Instead of responding immediately, she went to her room and returned with her laptop. Opening it, she showed her mother a document she'd been working on, a meticulous record of every discriminatory incident she'd experienced or witnessed, dating back to elementary school. "I've been keeping this journal for years," she explained quietly. "If we stop now, all of these other incidents stay hidden too. Nothing changes." The determination in her young eyes matched her mother's own resolve. That night they made their decision. They would not be silenced regardless of the cost. The decision to fight had ignited a fire in the Manning household, transforming their personal battle into a focused campaign for systemic change. The morning after Zora's resolute statement, The kitchen became a command center. Vanessa, in her professional role as a military officer, had faced down a host of sophisticated adversaries. Now she applied that same strategic genius to a police union, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and a crisis management firm. She contacted Major Williams and Captain Rodriguez, who had been working tirelessly behind the scenes. "The gloves are off," Vanessa said into her secure phone, her voice as sharp and clear as glass. "We're not waiting for them to make their next move. We're going on the offensive. Start digging into everything you can on Officer Reeves and Karen Thompson. I want to know their networks, their associations, their full history." Major Williams, a man who thrived on intellectual puzzles, was already one step ahead. "Colonel, we've discovered a pattern of similar incidents at other malls in the metropolitan area. The victims are all minorities, and the accusations were all for high-end electronics. The cases were quickly dismissed, but the individuals were publicly humiliated. This isn't an isolated incident, it's a playbook." Captain Rodriguez, meanwhile, had been focusing her attention on Officer Reeves. Her investigation had uncovered troubling connections. "Colonel, we've discovered concerning links," she reported during a secure call. "Reeves is connected to 3 known extremist groups through his personal email. Military intelligence has flagged him previously due to comments made about service members of color. His social media history is a goldmine of racially charged content. The police union's defense of his unblemished record is a complete lie." This information transformed the case from a local incident into a potential national security concern, opening new avenues for investigation beyond standard police misconduct channels. The revelation that Reeves was not just a rogue officer, but part of a larger organized network, was a game-changer. It was no longer just about Zora, it was about exposing a systemic problem that had been festering in law enforcement. The alliance continued growing in unexpected directions. The story of Zora's courage had gone viral, reaching people who had previously suffered in silence. The civil rights attorney Benjamin Harris was instrumental in this. He organized a support group for all of Karen Thompson's previous victims, and they came forward with sworn statements detailing her pattern of behavior. Each new testimony added another layer to the indictment against her. Perhaps the most significant new ally was Brad Reynolds, the younger security guard who had initially detained Zora. Haunted by his inaction, he had been trying to find a way to make amends. He approached Zora discreetly after she returned to school, waiting until she was alone. "I've been trying to reach you," he said nervously, glancing around. I know what I did was wrong. I can't undo that, but I can make sure it doesn't happen again." He handed her a thumb drive. "It's a complete backup of the mall's security footage from that day, including cameras they didn't admit existed. I made it before anyone could tamper with evidence." His voice dropped to a whisper. "There's more. I documented every time management told us to target specific types of shoppers, emails, recorded meetings, everything." Zora studied him carefully. She saw a young man weighed down by guilt, a man who had chosen to do the right thing when it was difficult. "Why are you helping now?" she asked quietly. Brad looked genuinely remorseful. "Because I stood by while they put handcuffs on a kid who didn't do anything wrong. I can't undo that, but I can make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." It's a start. The thumb drive proved invaluable. When Colonel Manning brought it to Major Williams, his eyes widened as he reviewed the contents. "This is far more extensive than we realized," he said, watching footage that clearly showed store manager Wilson directing security to follow specific customers based solely on appearance. "And it corroborates the experiences of the other victims who've come forward. This is more than a single incident, it's a corporate policy." Meanwhile, several Electromax employees, risking their jobs, provided internal memos outlining discriminatory security policies. A corporate whistleblower revealed that similar directives existed across multiple store locations, contradicting the company's public claims that this was an isolated incident. The evidence was building, creating a comprehensive picture of a system designed to profile and discriminate. National civil rights organizations provided media training for Zora and Vanessa, preparing them for the increasingly hostile interviews and public scrutiny. They also connected them with families across the country who had experienced similar situations, creating a support network that shared both emotional and practical resources. The Quiet campaign had become a national movement. Perhaps the most significant turning point came when General Hayes made an unexpected public statement. Standing at a Pentagon briefing, his uniform impeccable and his face grim, he spoke with the quiet authority of a man who held the power of a nation behind him. "The United States military stands firmly against discrimination in all forms," he announced. "The mistreatment of military dependents based on race is not just a civil matter, but a national security concern that affects morale and readiness." Without mentioning Zora specifically, he had sent a clear message that the full weight of military authority stood behind her case. The impact was immediate. The police department announced comprehensive bias training for all officers. The mall's corporate headquarters faced mounting pressure from shareholders concerned about potential lawsuits and boycotts. Their response was a sweeping policy overhaul, including new security protocols, independent oversight, and the termination of contracts with companies implicated in discriminatory practices. Even Zora's school felt the impact. The principal, who had been noticeably absent during her initial return, made a public apology and announced that her scholarship recommendation would be reinforced with additional endorsements from the entire science department. As support grew, so did the community healing process. Facilitated town halls brought together residents from different backgrounds to discuss experiences that had previously remained unspoken. Veterans of various races shared stories of fighting for a country that sometimes failed to protect their families. Parents discussed the painful conversations they were forced to have with their children about navigating spaces where they might be seen as suspicious by default. Through it all, Zora maintained the poised determination that had characterized her response from the beginning. When interviewed by national media, she redirected attention from herself to the systemic issues. "This isn't about one incident or one person," she explained, her voice steady and clear. "It's about recognizing patterns that have been normalized and changing them." As the court hearing date approached, the alliance demonstrated its strength in the most visible way yet. Thousands gathered for a peaceful support rally outside the courthouse, including military personnel in civilian clothes, students from schools across the district, and community members of all backgrounds. They came to stand in solidarity to show that this fight was not just Zora's but everyone's. The quiet resolve of the Manning household was met with an equal and opposite force from their adversaries. The coordinated resistance, once a series of isolated attacks, now intensified into a relentless campaign of intimidation. The first and most personal blow came in the form of vandalism. Returning home from a meeting with their attorneys, Vanessa and Zora found their front door spray-painted with hateful racial slurs and chilling threats. The violation of their personal space, a sanctuary in the midst of the media storm, struck deeper than any media manipulation or professional pressure. It was a direct assault on their sense of safety. That night, as they cleaned the graffiti together, Zora finally allowed herself a moment of raw vulnerability. Her hands, still marked by the angry red scars from the handcuffs, trembled as she scrubbed the paint. "Mom, is this worth it? Maybe we should just take the settlement." Vanessa set down her cleaning supplies, her gaze locking onto her daughters. "That's exactly what they want," she said, her voice a low, fierce whisper. "For good people to decide that justice is too expensive, too troublesome to pursue." She gestured toward the partially cleaned door. "This happens because they are afraid. Not of us specifically, but of what happens when people like us refuse to be silenced." After a moment of profound reflection, Zora nodded slowly, the truth of her mother's words resonating with her own experiences. "Like that quote on your office wall," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good people to do nothing." Vanessa smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "Exactly. But I need you to understand something important. This has to be your choice. If you want to accept the settlement and move on, I will support that decision completely. Your well-being comes first." Zora's response was not immediate. She went to her room and returned with her laptop. Opening it, she showed her mother a document she'd been working on for years, a meticulous journal detailing every discriminatory incident she had experienced or witnessed since elementary school. It was a private chronicle of systemic injustices, from biased teachers to suspicious clerks. "I've been keeping this for years," she explained quietly. "If we stop now, all of these other incidents stay hidden too. Nothing changes." The determination in her young eyes matched her mother's own resolve. That night, their decision was made. They would not be silenced. The next morning, they awoke to an unexpected sight. A group of veterans from various military branches had formed a protective perimeter around their home. They were quietly cleaning the remaining vandalism and standing guard. One of them, a retired Marine sergeant, approached Vanessa. "Colonel," he said, his voice a low rumble, "word got around about what happened to your home. We thought you could use some support." Their fight had officially transcended a single family. It had become a beacon for a wider community of people who had been wronged, but had lacked the platform to fight back. Similar acts of solidarity began appearing throughout the community. Local businesses displayed supportive messages, and a group of law students volunteered to help document evidence for their case. Meanwhile, the other side continued its aggressive tactics. Karen Thompson gave a tearful interview portraying herself as a victim of circumstance whose life had been unfairly ruined by an honest mistake. The police union spokesman emphasized Officer Reeves's 20 years of unblemished service, conveniently omitting the multiple complaints in his file. The mall's corporate attorneys contacted Major Williams with an amended settlement offer that included an increased financial package, but added a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. That same day, the security footage from Electromax mysteriously developed corruption issues in the critical segments, showing Karen planting her phone and targeting Zora. Fortunately, Captain Rodriguez had secured multiple backup copies through military channels, anticipating such a move. The most profound blow came when Zora's scholarship application was officially deferred pending a character review. The timing left little doubt about the connection to her ongoing case, but as the pressure mounted, the alliance grew stronger and more resourceful. 3 of Vanessa's former Delta Force colleagues, now working in private security, volunteered to protect their home. The student body at Zora's school created a study group, specifically to ensure her grades wouldn't suffer during the ordeal. The case, once a local news story, was now a national topic, a microcosm of a much larger conversation about race and justice in America. The mounting evidence and the unwavering support of the community solidified Zora's and Vanessa's resolve. The psychological battle designed to wear them down and force them into a quiet settlement had failed. They had found their strength not in an external force but in each other, and in the quiet, unwavering belief that their fight was just. The courthouse steps teemed with thousands of supporters as Zora and Colonel Manning arrived for the hearing. The crowd was a diverse tapestry of faces, veterans in civilian clothes, students from Zora's high school, community leaders, and parents who had faced similar injustices. News cameras captured their dignified entrance, focusing on Zora's calm demeanor and the visible but now healing scars on her wrists, a silent testimony to what had brought them there. Inside the packed courtroom, Judge Elaine Peterson surveyed the proceedings with experienced eyes. She was a woman known for her keen intellect and her no-nonsense approach to the law. "This court will maintain order and decorum regardless of the public attention this case has received," she announced firmly, her voice echoing through the silent room. The proceedings began with the presentation of evidence. Major Williams took the lead, his voice precise and authoritative. He showed the complete security footage from the mall, beginning with Karen Thompson deliberately planting her phone in her bag, and ending with Officer Reeves tightening the handcuffs on Zora. Technical experts confirmed the footage had not been altered, countering the defense's frantic claims of manipulation. Medical records were entered into evidence detailing the injuries to Zora's wrists, with doctors testifying that the handcuffs had been applied with unnecessary force, consistent with punitive intent rather than standard procedure. Officer Reeves sat stone-faced beside his union attorney, his expression a mask of resentment. Karen Thompson dabbed theatrical tears with a monogrammed handkerchief, her gaze darting nervously around the room. Store manager Garrett Wilson looked physically ill as emails documenting his discriminatory directives were entered into evidence, a damning paper trail that he couldn't deny. When Zora took the stand, the courtroom fell into a profound silence. With remarkable composure for a 16-year-old, she recounted the events clearly and precisely, neither embellishing nor minimizing what had occurred. She spoke of her passion for science and her love for her school project, painting a picture of a normal teenager pursuing her dreams. "I felt confused at first, then afraid," she testified, describing the moment of being handcuffed. "Not just for what was happening, but because I realized that no matter what I achieved or how I behaved, some people would always see me as suspicious." When asked about the impact on her life, she spoke with thoughtful candor. "Beyond the physical pain and public humiliation, the hardest part was seeing how systems I was taught to trust, store security police, could be weaponized based on how I look. It forced me to question whether meritocracy really exists, if excellence can be overshadowed by prejudice. The defense attorneys attempted to portray her as an angry activist with an agenda, but Zora's measured responses and academic achievements made such characterizations impossible to sustain. She was not a firebrand. She was a brilliant student who had been wronged, and her quiet dignity was more powerful than any loud protest. Colonel Manning's testimony followed a masterclass in balancing military precision with maternal emotion. "I've served this country through 3 combat deployments, risking my life to protect American values of equality and justice," she stated, her voice resonating with a deep sense of duty. "To return home and find my daughter bleeding in handcuffs because of racial profiling represents a failure of those very principles I've defended." When questioned about her military position potentially intimidating local authorities, she responded with quiet dignity. "My rank was irrelevant until they mocked it. What matters is that any parent, regardless of position, should expect their child to be treated with basic human dignity and due process." The security footage played again in full, allowing the court to witness every moment from Karen deliberately hiding her phone to Officer Reeves tightening handcuffs on a cooperative teenager. The courtroom remained hushed as the evidence accumulated, painting an undeniable picture of prejudice and abuse of authority. After 3 days of testimony and evidence presentation, the arguments concluded. The prosecution had built an ironclad case thanks to the meticulous work of Major Williams Captain Rodriguez and Zora's civilian legal team. The defense, meanwhile, had been left with nothing but flimsy excuses and outright lies. The final image the court was left with was that of a quiet, brilliant young woman sitting patiently while a system meant to protect her was used to humiliate and harm her. The outcome of the case was no longer in question. It was a matter of how justice would be delivered. 2 weeks after the conclusion of the hearing, Judge Elaine Peterson delivered her ruling. The courtroom was as silent as a tomb, a stark contrast to the buzzing energy that had filled it during the trial. She began by addressing Officer James Reeves, her voice cold and devoid of emotion. "This court finds Officer James Reeves guilty of civil rights violations, excessive force, and dereliction of duty. His actions were not an honest mistake, but a deliberate abuse of authority. He is suspended without pay, pending completion of mandatory bias training and psychological evaluation. Furthermore, this court recommends that the Atlanta Police Department conduct a full review of his employment history with a view toward termination." Her gaze then shifted to Karen Thompson, who sat trembling at the defense table. "Karen Thompson is found guilty of filing a false police report evidence, tampering, and wasting police resources. Her pattern of behavior demonstrates a clear, malicious intent to target and harm innocent individuals. She is sentenced to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service with organizations serving minority youth, and mandatory counseling to address her deep-seated prejudices." Addressing the store and mall representatives, Judge Peterson continued, "Electromax and Westfield Mall are found liable for creating and sustaining discriminatory security practices. They are ordered to implement comprehensive policy changes under court supervision for a period of 5 years, establish a $1 million scholarship fund for minority students in Zora Manning's name, and provide financial compensation to all identified victims of similar profiling." As the rulings were announced, Zora reached for her mother's hand. This wasn't about vengeance or punishment. It was about accountability and change. The judge concluded with a broader statement, her voice a powerful summation of the case. "This case reveals how discrimination becomes normalized through systems that enable and protect it. Today's ruling addresses not just individual actions, but the structures that allowed those actions to occur repeatedly without consequence." The impact of the case extended far beyond that single courtroom. The police department instituted new training requirements and accountability measures, including community oversight for complaint investigations. Retail establishments across the region voluntarily adopted new security protocols designed to eliminate profiling. Most significantly, Zora's testimony before a congressional committee on retail discrimination led to proposed federal legislation establishing clearer guidelines and penalties for businesses engaging in discriminatory security practices. Colonel Manning's military career, far from being damaged by the controversy, advanced to new heights. She was promoted to the rank of brigadier general and tasked with creating a specialized task force addressing civil rights issues affecting military families, transforming a personal injustice into institutional improvement. 1 year later, Zora stood at a podium in the same mall where she had once been handcuffed, now transformed by new management and policies. The space hosted the inaugural award ceremony for the scholarship foundation bearing her name. Real change isn't about punishing individuals, but transforming systems, she told the audience of students, community leaders, and media. What happened to me was not unique. What is unique is that we refuse to let it be buried or forgotten. As she announced the first 10 scholarship recipients, Zora embodied the perfect combination of her mother's strength and her own intellectual passion. Her acceptance to Johns Hopkins University's prestigious medical research program ensured her dream of scientific contribution remained on track undeterred by those who had tried to define her by prejudice rather than potential. The mall that had once been the site of humiliation now featured training materials and protocols that had become a national model for retail environments. The security office where Zora had been detained was converted into a community outreach center, offering resources and support for underserved youth. Even some of those initially resistant to change had evolved. Brad Reynolds, the security guard who had provided crucial evidence, now led training programs teaching security personnel how to maintain safety without discriminatory practices. Several officers from Reeves's former department had become advocates for reform within law enforcement. The most profound transformation, however, was visible in the everyday interactions throughout the community. The unspoken assumptions and casual discriminations that had once been commonplace were now recognized and challenged. Young people of all backgrounds moved through public spaces with greater confidence that they would be judged by their actions, not their appearance. As Brigadier General Manning watched her daughter addressing the audience with poise and passion, she reflected on how a single moment of injustice had catalyzed a movement for lasting change. The path had not been easy, but it had been necessary not just for Zora, but for everyone who would come after her. The antiseptic smell of Atlanta Memorial Hospital surrounded Zora as doctors examined her wrists more thoroughly. The emergency room buzzed with activity, but in the curtained examination area, there was a bubble of tense quiet. Dr. Williams, a middle-aged black woman, carefully cleaned the cuts from the handcuffs, while a nurse documented each injury with photographs. These lacerations are consistent with restraints applied with excessive force, Dr. Williams stated for the record. There's tissue damage that will leave scarring unless properly treated. Brigadier General Manning stood nearby, her military training, allowing her to maintain outward composure while internally processing the rage any mother would feel seeing her child injured. The hospital visit took an unexpected turn when Dr. Williams recognized Zora's name. "You're the Manning girl from Westwood High," she said, a flicker of professional curiosity in her eyes. When Zora nodded, the doctor's demeanor softened slightly. "My daughter was at the regional science fair last month. She couldn't stop talking about your research project on solar energy applications. Said it was the most impressive work she'd ever seen." This brief moment of recognition of seeing Zora for her accomplishments, rather than as a suspect, visibly strengthened the teenager. Her shoulders straightened as a police detective entered to take her official statement. With remarkable clarity, Zora recounted every detail of the incident from entering the store to being handcuffed and detained. Her precise memory impressed the detective, who took meticulous notes. "You mentioned Officer Reeves made comments about your kind," the detective asked. "Can you recall his exact words?" Zora quoted Reeves verbatim, including racial microaggressions too subtle to be overtly discriminatory, but unmistakable in their intent. As she spoke, a hospital administrator appeared at the doorway looking nervous. "General Manning, there's a situation developing. The hospital lobby is filling with reporters, and Officer Reeves's police union representative is demanding to speak with you." Vanessa exchanged glances with the detective. "I need a moment with my daughter." When they were alone, she took Zora's uninjured hand. "This is becoming larger than anticipated. Are you absolutely certain you want to pursue this? We could still accept a private settlement and protect your privacy." Zora met her mother's gaze with unwavering determination. "Mom, you always taught me that real change doesn't come from staying comfortable. How many other kids has this happened to who didn't have a mother in special forces?" The pride that swelled in Vanessa's chest almost overwhelmed her military composure. "All right then, let's do this right." While Zora completed her medical treatment, Vanessa stepped into the hallway to make a call to her commanding officer. "General Hayes, the situation has escalated. Local media is involved, and there's evidence of systematic discrimination at multiple levels. She briefly outlined the developments, including Officer Reeves's suspension and the emerging pattern of similar incidents. Hayes's response was immediate and firm. "This crosses into potential civil rights violations. I'm authorizing full support from our legal team and opening an official military investigation into the treatment of a dependent of military personnel." This classification transformed what might have been dismissed as a local incident into a federal case with significant resources behind it. When Vanessa returned to Zora's room, Captain Rodriguez was waiting with troubling news. "General, we've discovered this isn't Officer Reeves's first excessive force complaint involving a military family. There was an incident last year with a Marine's son that was quietly resolved. The records were sealed, but we've requested access through military channels." Meanwhile, Police Chief Garcia had initiated a department-wide review of all complaints against Officer Reeves, discovering a disturbing pattern that had been obscured by internal protection. The police union was already pushing back, issuing a statement supporting Reeves and characterizing the incident as a routine detention that had been politicized by outside agitators. At Westfield Mall, the situation continued to develop. Mall owner Frederick Jenkins, recognizing the serious threat to his business, had fired manager Garrett Wilson after reviewing security footage from multiple stores showing a clear pattern of discriminatory security practices. Karen Thompson and her husband faced mounting legal troubles as more victims of her false accusations came forward. Corporate headquarters for Electromax had issued an emergency statement distancing themselves from the local store's actions and promising a comprehensive review of security protocols nationwide. Social media amplified the story hourly. Justice for Zora was trending nationally, with celebrities and public figures expressing outrage. Zora's classmates had organized a protest outside the mall that had grown to hundreds of participants. When Zora was finally discharged from the hospital that evening, she was surprised to find her AP chemistry teacher, Mr. Harrington, waiting in the lobby. "Your classmates sent me," he explained. "They wanted you to know they've gathered all the supplies for your project and completed the initial setup. They said to tell you that you should focus on healing while they handle the preliminaries." This small act of solidarity brought the first tears Zora had allowed herself all day. The following morning, as Zora rested at home, Vanessa received an unexpected call from a prominent civil rights attorney, Elaine Washington, who offered to represent Zora pro bono. This case has the potential to create meaningful precedent regarding detention procedures for minors and racial profiling in commercial settings, Washington explained. "And frankly, your daughter's poise and articulation make her an ideal plaintiff." Vanessa explained she needed to discuss options with Zora and their existing military legal team. When she mentioned the possibility of settling privately to protect Zora's privacy, Washington's response was thought-provoking. "General, from what I've heard, your daughter understands something many adults never grasp, that individual compensation without systemic change perpetuates the problem for others who follow." When Vanessa shared this conversation with Zora over breakfast, her daughter didn't hesitate. "She's right, Mom. If we settle quietly, nothing changes. Karen Thompson will find another target. Officer Reeves will get his badge back. The store will create better ways to hide their discrimination." Zora paused, looking down at her bandaged wrists. "I keep thinking about that quote you have framed in your office, the one about necessary trouble." "Good trouble," Vanessa said, recognizing the reference to civil rights leader John Lewis. "Necessary trouble. You know that choosing this path won't be easy. There will be people who try to discredit you, question your character, minimize what happened." Zora nodded solemnly. "I know, but I also know who I am." That afternoon, they received word that military investigators had uncovered communications between Officer Reeves and several known extremist groups, including racially charged messages about keeping certain neighborhoods safe. This discovery transformed the case, yet again, potentially involving domestic terrorism task forces. Meanwhile, Westfield Mall had announced major security policy changes, including mandatory bias training and new oversight procedures. The corporate parent of Electromax had placed the entire local management team on administrative leave pending investigation. What surprised everyone, however, was the groundswell of community support. 7 other families had come forward with similar experiences at the same mall, forming an impromptu support group. Zora's school principal, initially cautious about involvement, had issued a strong statement backing his star student and confirming her impeccable character. local businesses began displaying Justice for Zora signs, creating a visible map of safe spaces throughout the community. That evening, as news vans remained parked outside their home, Zora and Vanessa sat in their living room reviewing options with Major Williams and Elaine Washington. "The mall's parent company has offered a substantial settlement," Williams explained. "7 figures, no admission of wrongdoing, but with mandatory policy changes." Washington countered, "But a civil rights lawsuit could create binding legal precedent that would protect thousands of others in similar situations." Zora listened carefully, then asked, "Which approach does more to ensure this doesn't happen to someone else, someone without my advantages?" The question hung in the air, revealing a wisdom far beyond her 16 years. Her decision was final. The story was hers to tell, and it would not be silenced.